As you may know, I write the Market Watch column for Business of Home, and my colleague, Warren Shoulberg, writes the Retail Watch column. I always learn a lot from Warren's perspective. He's been covering the home retail category for decades. Some think he may have invented it. Let's do a quick check-in with Warren on the winners and losers in retail during COVID. Let's begin with the big picture, and let's give people the good news first. It sounds like you feel like the entire home pie is getting bigger. Tell us why.
So I think that's absolutely true. And for anybody who ever worried about being in the home business and was jealous of other categories, this is the time to kind of be grateful that you ended up in this and not in the apparel or the fashion accessories business. Home is really kind of the sweet spot in the retail market right now. A couple of obvious reasons. We're all stuck at home and we're looking around where we live and we're saying, God, this place is a dump. I got to do something. So that's helping. The stimulus checks are helping as well, and they've petered off a little bit, obviously, but they gave a nice little shot. But I think critically is that the housing market, unlike the Great Recession, is doing really well. And when the housing market does well, the home furnishings business does well. So you got a couple of factors in there, and they all seem to indicate that this is going to go on for a while.
So historically, Warren, help us understand the relationship and the timing between a strong housing market and the home furnishings market.
So the important thing in the housing market is, sometimes you get hung up on housing starts or home sales, new home sales, used home sales. You really got to look at it in the aggregate and look at all of them. The other key number that I always look for is household formation numbers. And that's critical because that tells you how many people are starting new households. And when they do that, they need stuff. So again, on the top level, look at the entire housing market, not just an isolated number. What we've seen is kind of a two-step pattern as it affects products and services. So initially, whether somebody has bought a house, has moved into a house, is staying in their current house, the first thing they do is generally some hardcore remodeling. And that could be new floors, that could be new windows, kitchen cabinets, those kinds of things. And so retailers like Home Depot and Lowe's feel this first because that's where people are going for home improvement products. And if you look at their numbers, they're spectacular. And because that's what people are doing, they're going there. The home furnishing side of it, generally, depending on the product, lags 6 to 9 months after that. So after people have done some hardcore home improvements, then they're going to move into home furnishings products. The things that generally get bought first, furniture, big rugs, and major appliances. Those are kind of the three categories that get hit first. Obviously, big ticket. And so you're going to see those happening first. And again, you're already starting to see that. Then it trickles down to more of the decorative accessories, to a new set of dishes, sheets, towels, doodads. I mean, whatever it is, those are the products that come later in the cycle. So if you're in that sector of the home business, you may not be feeling it completely yet, but you will based on the historical patterns. And it's been pretty consistent for a long time.
Okay, that's interesting because when we saw the huge sales spike from Wayfair, we also simultaneously saw a significant drop in their average order value. So it seemed like they got a lot of new customers, but they weren't spending a lot of money all at once. So is it your feeling that that's the lag you're talking about and that people are going to make those more significant and major purchases in the coming months? And who's going to benefit from that?
Yeah, I think, Wayfair is a fascinating company to look at and is one that I'm not sure that there's somebody you can look at and say, okay, they're indicative of what's going on in the marketplace. Certainly, the strength that they've shown indicates that the online segment and e-com is picking up market share. There's no question about that. For the last quarter, Wayfair comp numbers were up 85%, and that's amazing. They also made their first profit ever since going public in 2011. So that's pretty impressive. I think a lot of people, and Wayfair has talked about this, they've said they've got a lot of new customers. And so I think if you're a new customer for Wayfair, you're probably not going to go right in and buy a $3,000 sofa or a $2,000 bedroom set. But you may just kind of dab your toe in the water and test them, and and buy a scatter rug or buy a mirror or a picture frame, or some smaller ticket items. And I think that's what we're seeing is that people are just testing them out. People that never shopped on Wayfair before, and we'll see whether Wayfair hangs on to those guys. Again, historically,
that's the big challenge for them, whether they can hold on to those customers. You've also made the point that the stores that were allowed to stay open, the Targets, the Walmarts, have taken a surprisingly and perhaps unexpectedly large share of the home furnishings market as well. And maybe people didn't realize how much home furnishings related product they were actually selling. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jim Cramer on CNBC said it's the greatest wealth transfer in the history of retailing. And I think that's a great way to look at it. The stores that were allowed to stay open because they were selling essential goods have picked up enormous market share from the stores that were forced to close in the spring and were closed for 10 to 12 weeks. So the big winners, Target and Walmart, absolutely in the mass side, Home Depot and Lowe's in the do-it-yourself home improvement side, and Sam's and Costco in the warehouse club. So these guys, and you went in there and you bought food or you bought hand sanitizer, or if you could find it, you bought toilet paper. While you were in the store, you probably meandered over and maybe picked up some new towels or a set of dishes or a piece of wall art. And those stores were the beneficiary of just being open and shoppers wanting to get out and buy stuff, particularly if they had stimulus checks that were going to give them a little bit more disposable income. So those guys really picked up market share. And I point to those 6 guys specifically, and all of them in the home space, obviously. Walmart and Target specifically in terms of home furnishings. So they picked up a lot of market share. The losers were the guys that were forced to close. So this is Macy's, this is Kohl's, this is Bed Bath & Beyond, this is Penny's. So these are retailers who had been doing significant home business, and even though they had e-com that was allowed to stay open, it obviously wasn't enough. And so those guys lost market share. And again, the question is, are these purchasing patterns that are going to stay? And I think the best example is you go back to the 2008 Great Recession, when, again, the dynamics were different and the winners and losers were different, but a lot of people migrated to the dollar stores because they were broke and they needed cheap places to buy stuff. The dollar stores ended up hanging on to a lot of those customers as the economy improved again. And so I think it's quite likely that you're going to see the haves continue to hang on to a lot of the business that they picked up this spring and early summer.
So what about your classic furniture stores, your Ethan Allen, your Ashley's, all those big furniture chains, and so many of the retailers that High Point companies relied on for such a huge share of their business? How do they come back?
So some of those guys, quasi stayed open for a little longer than they should have, but eventually virtually all of them shut down. They're starting to see a bump. Obviously, with most of those guys, their e-com business is not as high as it should be. So that's critical for them. You look at somebody like RH or the Williams-Sonoma brands, they're doing 50% of their volume in online sales, whereas a regional furniture specialty operation significantly less. Maybe 10%, maybe a little bit higher. So those guys need to work on their e-com, obviously. I think now that the stores are open, I think they will get a lot of their business back. They still are places where a lot of shoppers turn to when they want to buy furniture. So I think they'll do okay, but any retailer that does not have a robust e-com business, I think is just doomed. And we haven't talked about the off-price guys, about Home Goods and Ross and TJ Maxx. Those guys have virtually no online business. And even though they've had a great return as their stores are open, I think this has the potential to be a critical flaw for them if they don't get their e-com business really up and running. Could be a big problem.
Well, and you mentioned Bed Bath & Beyond earlier. That historically has been a challenge for them as well. They were very slow to move in the digital space and invested more in stores over the years. Is that going to be even more of a challenge for them now?
Yeah, I think it will be, but under the new management, they're doing a lot of things right. They've gotten their e-com business up to about 20% of their overall sales, and this was pre-COVID. So that's a huge improvement over the single digits that it had been wallowing in for quite some time. They also moved fast during the store closings, and they had virtually no buy online, pick up in store, or curbside pickup operations before. And they moved fast, again, much faster than that company was known for under prior management. And they've got that buy online, pick up in store, which has the dreadful name of BOPIS. And please, somebody come up with a better name than that. It sounds like a skin rash. But they've moved fast into that and on curbside pickup. So I give them credit for that. That said, they should be doing better. They've talked about some comp increases and some dramatic increases in their online sales. But when you look at what Wayfair did and what some other guys did, they should be doing better. And that's going to be a challenge for them.
With regards to that challenge, the longer we seem to be staying in this COVID period, the less people seem to your earlier point, need to see furniture in person. We talked earlier about perhaps people don't need to do sit tests the way they used to, or see so many things in real life. Is it your sense that online is just going to continue to take a greater and greater share, and that ultimately, regardless of when these furniture stores reopen all of their stores, it's simply not going to matter as much?
I'm not one of those people who thinks physical retailing is doomed. I think as a social activity and for a certain type of shopper, it's always going to be important. But I think, again, I talked about RH and Williams-Sonoma. They've got a great model. So RH has built these elaborate galleries, and they basically say, come in, look at the product, sit in it. We don't really expect you to buy it in the store, but then go home and order it online. Their yellow page size catalogs serve the same function as kind of lookbooks and the store is a look store. I think that's a model that more retailers are going to have to adapt. And it's not just at the RH level. I think if you look what IKEA is doing, and IKEA is the third or fourth largest home furnishings retailer in the country now. They were incredibly behind in their e-commerce, and they realized it, and they've really stepped up their game, and they've gotten much more aggressive at it. So you're going to see this kind of model work at multiple levels, and so the stores do not go away. Maybe there's fewer of them. Maybe they're smaller. Maybe a 100,000 square foot furniture showroom, maybe that's not necessary. But if you look at some of the smaller ones as a place where there's a representation of the merchandise, that could work. So I wouldn't, if I were a furniture retailer, I would not be crashing and burning my leases right now. I think there's a role for it, but it's got to be part of a bigger strategy. And
okay, so it sounds like the takeaway is don't give up on physical retail just yet, but retailers better get darn good at that online strategy.
Yeah, and I want a disclaimer that I don't get a commission from mall operators or real estate leasers, but I do think physical stores will continue to play a role and will be important as part of a balance.
Warren, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dennis. Take care. Stay well.